Hello and welcome to tasting pack number 3. We're pretty excited about this pack. We have gone for a rum theme throughout the whiskies. As we've talked before, whiskey is finished in different types of barrels. Very common ones would be sherry, port and bourbon, but you can get some excellent, strange and unusual barrel finishes. Rum's not that strange and unusual, but it certainly adds a very particular element to a whiskey. The thing about other barrels compared to bourbon, port and sherry is when they're finished in rum barrels or sauternes casks or whatever it may be, we mean finished as in it goes in at the last minute, in relative terms to how long it's been in there. So you might see a 12-year-old finished in wine barrels. Usually that means, as we saw with the Hellier's Road in earlier packs, that the last part of the maturation period is done in those wine barrels, not the entire thing. We'll kick it straight off with the one we're very excited about, Sullivan's Cove, their double wood. The Sullivan's Cove distillery from Tasmania leaped into the international spotlight after winning Best Whisky of the World, Best Single Malt of the World in 2014. Since then, they've just skyrocketed in popularity, and that was for their French oak. This is a blended malt they do based on their two other varieties, the French oak and the American oak, which means that some of that world award-winning whiskey is actually in this batch, along with their other variety as well. The advantage of having two in the one for this Sullivan's is that you get the flavours that won at the award and that everyone thinks are world standard, but you also get the different flavours coming through from their other variety. So it's pretty much a 2-for-1. It's very light, and that's why we're starting with it. Their other varieties being that more intense, sort of from the same wood, the entire maturation and then bottled, are a bit stronger, a bit more intense. This also has a weaker ABV than their other ones, but you still get those really nice light flavours that you get coming through the back of the other varieties are really on the nose here. Things like sugar, apple, lots of that nice, the bourbon quality we've talked about before. And almost a biscuity cereal to create kind of that apple crumble smell, minus the cream in this one. And on the palate, that really develops. The fruit becomes a little bit more complex and a bit more obvious. There's not much of a wooded note to this at all. So for those people who had the Macallan in an earlier pack that was going for a particular wood taste, this one is deliberately, or it seems like deliberately, not going for that at all, which means that those really light fruits and florals, there's a lot of sort of natural vegetation smell, doesn't get beaten down by the oak. The thing about Sullivan's Cove as well is that being from Tasmania, it's got that unique flavour to the base spirit that you see with Tasmanian whiskies. So whereas for Northern Hemisphere whiskies, Scottish whiskies, you might expect green apple maybe, but a lot of that's just influenced and you get those sort of basic fruit flavours from the bourbon, if it's matured in bourbon. Tasmania has that real red apple flavour that kind of comes through in a lot of the different distilleries in Tas. That would be based on where it's made. Very easy drinking, but very nice and complicated in the different fruits. There's some light nuttiness on the finish, but not too much. The fruit basically just develops into a nice, syrupy, apple crumble type of drink. Very good. And it segues beautifully, as we try to do, into our second one, the Balvenie Caribbean Cask. Now, this is the first one in our lineup that's actually rum finished. The flavours that you get from rum are often the same type as we had in this Sullivan's, that really light, fruity flavour. But with rum finish, it's usually that more tropical fruit and flavours that you might not actually get in any other cask finish, like pineapples and banana. And that's certainly true here. It's not dominating. It's a 14-year-old. It's, as I say, only finished for a brief time in the ex-Caribbean rum casks. So it's not a very dominant flavour, but it's certainly there. Judging by this one, it would be a bourbon matured, finished in rum. So the rum develops on the palate, whereas on the nose it was that pineapple banana sort of tropical fruit punch mix, and there wasn't a lot of clearly. If you drink rum, you wouldn't sort of instantly say, "Yep, that's a rum smell." On the palate, the rum taste is noticeable, and that develops it into that kind of a bit more sugary, syrupy mouthfeel and flavour, and makes that tropical fruit a little bit more like candied tropical fruit. Doesn't have a particularly long finish. Sullivan's doesn't either. That's, as we've said before, often based on the ABV. If it's not very alcoholic, you don't kind of get that lingering finish of the warmth from the alcohol. But this one has an interesting 360 turnaround where those tropical fruit flavours come back as that alcohol sort of dissipates on your palate, and you're left with that pineapple-y, a bit of spice, like an allspice, caps it off nicely. This one, our next one, the third, will continue on excellently. It's another rum finish one, deliberately so. It's by Ben Riach. It's a 15-year-old. They've got a whole range of 15-year-old whiskies, and they finish them in different woods, and they release them and see what happens. So it's the same age if you see a 15-year-old Ben Riach, but they've just been finished in different casks. We obviously picked the rum one as it's going to complement the Balvenie very well. It will be a little bit more intense. It's a bit older, so it's a 15-year-old, and also it's finished a little bit longer in the rum casks. They're ex-Jamaican dark rum, so you'll get those really, there's a little bit almost like a salty element to the sugary rum, and also it's contrasted by the fact that we've just had kind of a lighter rum. This one's a bit more present. So on the nose, you actually get more of a rum smell. Same sort of things are there. The tropicalness of the fruit, a little bit of apple and things again, bit of a carryover from the wood they use. But there's a little bit more of the red fruit, which is a very dark rum kind of element, that more bit of plum, candied red fruits. The palate is interesting because we've talked before about sometimes you can have a divided type of flavour. In one part, it's got that rum taste, the sort of red fruit and spicy rum. On the other side, it's the lighter, delicate, more apple, peach fruit, but they don't really sort of mix together. It's a separate flavour profile. Ben Riach are an excellent distillery. They've got an interesting past. Won't go into it too much, but essentially they started production, and a lot of money is sunk into a distillery in the early years to put everything in barrels before you can sell anything. Problem with the finance, the distillery was mothballed, which is when basically no one wants it and it sits there. Someone owns it, but they're not really doing anything with it, not producing anything in bottles. And then it was revitalised later by a new buyer who, in buying it, found that they had all this stock of maturing Ben Riach spirit in barrels. And so some of this Ben Riach you won't see again. If it's from a barrel that was part of that mothballed era and they've released it later, they might have got a fair few bottles out of it, but once they're gone, and Ben Riach's new direction might be just not to make that one again. Also, of course, barrel availability. You might not be able to get Jamaican ex-rum casks that easily now, so Ben Riach might opt for something a bit more market-friendly and that they can get in bigger bulk. A longer finish. The age can affect finish as well as alcohol content. That might be what's at play here. Certainly the rum lasts more than it did with the Balvenie. So we're sort of progressing upwards in terms of how much the rum influences the whiskey. Very good. If you like rum, it'd be an interesting one to try because the rum elements are definitely there, but the interaction of the rum and the whiskey changes both, I think, for the better, but I'm not really a rum drinker. Moving along to our fourth, Aberlour A'bunadh. It's a good one because it comes with this nice wax top, which is always a plus. Not just aesthetically, but also it indicates that you can tell very clearly that no air's gotten in, and so it hasn't been oxidised by the oxygen with a sort of faulty seal or a faulty cork. Aberlour A'bunadh is a very interesting whiskey because they do it purely by batch. Aberlour make other ones, 12-year-olds, 10-year-olds, whatever they do, but the A'bunadh series is always different. They do it purely by the batch that's ready to go at that time, and so the flavour profile of, say, we have the batch 49 here, will be very different from the 45, or there's a 50 out now. So if you think you've had Aberlour A'bunadh before, and you remember what batch number it was, just make sure that when you see it behind a bar or in our pack, you haven't had this one, because it's worth comparing them and trying the difference. I don't know if you can see it, but the colour of this one is very rich compared to the lighter bourbon, and even with the rum influence, rum finished whiskies we've had before. This is a sherry finished whiskey, and the A'bunadh always is. This is that Spanish Oloroso sherry barrel. Very interesting on the nose. There's a combination of that, what you'd expect from sherry: red fruit, sultanas, raisins, dates. That Christmas cake appeal that is so good about things like Glenfarclas that love to make sherry bombs. But this one has also almost like a hickory, smoky, meaty element to it. It works very well. But it's not your traditional just fruity whiskey. There's a real chewiness to it. On the palate, big hit. Straight away, all the red fruits are there, but they're intertwined very well with the that. It's like a hickory smoked barbecue element. It's not very dominant, but it's just there behind other sherried whiskies, behind this one that's not there in other sherried whiskies. Long finish, powerful ABV, over 60%. If it's too intense for you, just in terms of the alcohol content, and you're not picking up on some of those subtleties, just put a bit of water in. Very drinkable though. Some high ABV alcohols, whiskies with high alcohol, all you get is that hit. That's got to dissipate, and then you get to the actual flavour. This one, it's not at all that the alcohol overshadows the other flavours. It's just that it's ever present, because at 60%, you're going to be tasting something different from a 40%. Definitely a good dessert whiskey. Not that you can't have it any time of day, but it'd be great after some sort of, or after a meal. It's got that really nice mouthfeel, chewy mouthfeel. It's very digestive. And finally, not to continue the rum development of our earlier ones, we have Kalila Mock, because we like to finish with a peated. Kalila Mock was chosen here because the high sherry approach that they've taken with A'bunadh is complemented by peat. Peat is often perceived as quite intimidating, and we've had it in our last two packs as the fifth one. It is a dominant flavour, for sure, but in the same sort of way that salt emphasises sweetness in things like salted caramel or putting salt in hot chocolates, peat can emphasise sweetness. So if something's got underlying sweetness at the back, peat can bring that out. This one it does, but the sweetness isn't that sugary sweetness so much. This is very lemony, zesty, certainly a little bit of mandarin or one of the more orange citruses. but lemon's certainly present. And it's got some nice floral natural notes too. So there's a bit of dry hay, a little bit of that heather smell, and then coming through as well, of course, is just the peat. It's not as strong ABV, certainly as Abuna, so it's a step down there, and as other Kalilas they've made quite strong ones. This one's, not too big a hit, but that lets that lemony zest come through. And we've tried to do a little bit of a full circle because there's that cereal grain element with a little bit of nutty spice, some slight caramels as well. There's a bourbon influence, of course, but that gives it that biscuit base sort of tart approach that the Sullivan's has. But this one has peat, whereas Sullivan's has none. Not a long finish. If you're not a fan of peat because of how it lingers and how strong and intense it is, this one will be a good one to try. It's actually quite subdued compared to other Kalilas. So if you've had a Kalila 12-year-old before, this is actually quite muted compared to that. But we chose it here so as not to get rid of, if you're doing this in a flight, the tastes of the rum that are kind of still there from the finish of those, and the nice sherry element of the Abano that just came before. Well, that's it for this tasting pack. We hope you've enjoyed the choices, as always. If you're keen to try other rum-finished whiskies, there are a few of them out there. They're not the most common of woods, as I said, but they every now and then a distillery will play with a special release that's done in rum, or there are certain distilleries that just like to, every now and then, do one a bit like a revival of something it's done before. So certainly watch out for Caribbean cask, probably pretty common. Benriach, if you get it through the pack, of course you can have it that way, but otherwise it's actually quite hard to find. Sullivan's Cove, no rum element, but Sullivan's Cove is rare as hen's teeth around the globe. They don't ship to every market. In Australia, they're quite limited. You'll see them in some specialist bottle shops, but not all, and they just don't have enough capacity to cope with the demand, and so it's quite hard to get your hands on this sometimes. We'd thoroughly recommend it. It's got the 2014 best whiskey in the world in this one. So give it a try, and if you like this one, consider other Sullivans. Until next time, Slanja.